politics, we do know that we had the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, and Raila Odinga going to China, and the narrative was that they were going to, well, get funding for the SGR, amongst other things. But of course, that did not happen, to the relief of many Kenyans. But of course, the question that we'd also like to find out, is that really a good thing when we have what is now being called the railroad to nowhere? Why? Because it is not complete. Maybe it is just a temporary gap, but that's one of the things that we're going to be discussing. But we also did have Nzioka Waita from State House, who was hosted by Sophia Wanuna, my colleague, right here in studio. And he had this to say, so we want to listen into what he had to say before we get into the discussion. All right, and as soon as we have that sound bite, we are going to bring it up. But the question that we're asking this morning, and we'd like to find out from you, is whether you feel that the government is being honest. Do you think the government is being honest about the 368 billion loan from China, a facility from China, for the extension of the SGR line? Do you think the government is being honest? Because we have one side, before they left, saying that they are actually going to get some of that funding for that to be complete. We also have the president on record having given a timeline as to when the SGR is going to be complete, but that seemed to have changed. But the soundbite is now in. Let's listen into Nzioka Waita.
And a feasibility study. So was it that at the time Kenya was going to seek for funding for this stretch, Naivasha to Kisumu, there had not been a feasibility study, or at least one satisfactory to the Chinese?
I think the feasibility studies precede every project that is done.
Yes.
And every time you look to do a renewal, for example, when we did what we call SGR Phase 1, which was Nairobi to Mombasa, that was preceded by feasibility study, and that was done. And then there was Nairobi to Naivasha, which is Phase 2A. That was preceded by a feasibility study, underpinned largely by an industrial park and a special economic zone in Naivasha. Now, the business case for Nairobi, from Naivasha to Kisumu, and whether to Malaba and subsequently into Uganda, was predicated on a feasibility study that is extra jurisdictional, as in it involves Kenya and it involves other countries. At the time, it is something that we had not fully appreciated by consulting our neighbors, and we did go there with some of them, and the discussions ended the way they did, and everybody retreated back to the drawing board to conclude those studies. I think the question of whether we had gone there to ask for the funds, again, is misplaced. We had gone there because this project, as part of the BRI, was always envisaged to go across the continent. And the fact that we had completed one segment, it only logical that we report on the successes of Phase 1 and look at the prospects of Phase 2A and Phase 2B.
Yeah.
All right, so we don't want to dwell on whether that was the reason for going or not, whether it was the agenda or not, might not be important right now. The bottom line is the money didn't come in. So let me start with you, Honorable Odege, on the question of whether you feel government is being honest. Is there something possibly that we're not being told about the SGR? There seems to have been a dream of what the SGR should be, given a start point and a finish point. But where we are today, it looks like it has ended up being done halfway, and the halfway is not even complete. Could there be something the government is not telling us?
Okay, when you look at the time when SGR came into place, the idea was to make it cross the country. And if it fails to cross the country, I think it will not make any economic sense. So the idea of trying to get it to Malaba is a very good idea, but the idea of this thing of trying to go to China to get money, it has not come out very clearly. I think the issue is very clear now, maybe with the president himself, but what I'm trying to maybe read Kenyans are reading too much out of, I don't think a head of state can leave a country to go to another country to sign for a loan before that loan is negotiated ahead of him. That one, I think there is something amiss.
Okay, so
you don't expect a head of state to leave the country to go for a loan when it's not ready.
So could it be that the information we had, because we do have the leader of opposition, Raila Odinga, at some point saying that when they go to China, he's going to be joining the president. And part of the things that they're going to negotiate is the loan for the SGR.
You know, when you say you are going to negotiate, and even if you want to go to negotiate for even a marriage, you don't go and there to negotiate and come back with a lady. You can go and start a process which is ongoing. But I strongly believe going to China maybe was just to engineer a process, but not to come back with the money. You don't expect head of state to leave a country to go for something which is not ready. I don't think.
Weda, your thoughts?
I think something is amiss. Something is amiss. Either somebody spoke too soon, or certain groundwork was not done, or Chinese have certain questions to be answered which has not been answered. It is not as clear as it ought to be a matter coming from a functioning good government where the president is and the leader of opposition and African high something is there. So either when the High Commissioner, Honorable Raila Odinga, was saying we are going to negotiate the Chinese loan and so on, he may not have fully been briefed or fully read the papers. And therefore speculation became higher. And Kenyans thought that immediately people went to China, there will be money flowing. Because I think there's also a need for a section to show that the handshake is bringing in goodies. Because yesterday I was at home, the other day I was also at the home, and people want to know where is the profit of this handshake. So maybe Honorable Raila also want to say, you see now the railway is coming, courtesy of the handshake, all these things is coming. So they may have spoken fast.
But wouldn't it be worrying having such a high-level, high-powered delegation going to China and it's not clear to them or to us what they're going there to do? Because for him to make a statement like that, I would like to imagine that he had a good brief of what their trip is all about.
Personally, I don't think I know, but my guess is that he had not read the real papers. Not read the correct paper, because all these people do not report to him. Just a few brief that let's go to China, my brother, and then you sit with me there and you talk the African part, how the railway should reach Congo. So we tell the Chinese, but meanwhile we have ours reaching Busia. So I really don't think he could have gone into the details, and therefore the information he gave had more hope than the reality in the papers.
All right. Senator Irungu Kangata, your thoughts on the trip and generally why it should be so unclear. By now would expect that from the office of the president or from the even office of the Ministry of Transport, because they did give a statement after we learned that the loan was not granted or negotiated this time, but there seems not to be clarity as to what really happened.
Well, I tend to disagree with your statement to the extent that the ministry did issue a statement immediately thereafter.
The CS Macharia,
the CS Juma also, CS Macharia, they did issue statements clarifying some of the headlines that were appearing in the newspapers post that event. And from my reading of that post by CS Juma is that originally they never went there to seek for more funds to take railway to Kisumu. If that is the correct position, then I do blame Raila Odinga for making pronouncements before the trip took place, which tended to give an impression that was the key reason why they were going there. And therefore, for me, Raila has been embarrassed by the turn of events, and he needs next time to make conclusions which are supported by evidence.
I would be concerned and worried if he made statements that were just out of the blues. I would like to imagine that there is a proper brief that one receives and one gets before you make a statement like that. You know what you're going to do in China. Otherwise, why take such a huge delegation and you're not even sure what
Although also maybe also just to comment and reply to that, apart from him, I think I saw a lot of newspapers that were speculating even before the trip took place that is going to be a key agenda. I don't know whether the newspapers took that from Raila Odinga or they were leaked by those people who are going to China, but otherwise it was almost clear that is going to be to form part of the key agenda once they reach there.
Yes, sir.
Okay, let me try to correct what my brother is saying, because I don't see how Raila is embarrassed here. because it's to the knowledge of all Kenyans that SGR will have to reach Malaba. And when a process of trying to fund it has started, it's not a must that you must come back with money. Yeah, but when you go to negotiate or when you want to initiate a process, does not mean you must come with money. You must come back with money. But the nitty-gritties of this thing, I think, can best be explained by the President Raila himself.
Okay.
Some of us are simply speculating.
And maybe to move away from speculation, let's stick to fact and the viability of the SGR. One of the questions that it was coming out that was raised by the Chinese was, first of all, how viable it is. And that now remains a question. Maybe after their test between Mombasa and Naivasha, the viability now is questionable.
I sit in the Transport Committee in Parliament, and I can tell you, let us not be cheated. The project is viable. The only problem is that the kind of agreement we negotiated with China has held the whole process hostage because it's being managed by Chinese themselves.
Is it too expensive? Because it can be viable, but when you look at it in terms of economies of scale, maybe it is very expensive.
They are managing it themselves, and when you look at the revenue collected and how they are paying themselves, it's high time Kenyans to take charge and agree on how to pay them their debts.
Why would they require Kenya to give an audit of how viable it is when they're fully managing?
What kind of audit are they looking for when they are the ones managing the project?
And that's the question. Do you think this is still becoming unclearer? Because if they are managing it, and one of the questions that was raised during that meeting was the viability and whether it is going to be viable once it is done, especially at the cost that Kenya has.
Personally, as well, one of the key reasons why I stood with President Uhuru throughout was that one day the railway will reach Kisumu, Busia. It was good when the railway used to go there. It's a promise I would have wished my president to fulfill before he leaves office. And it was good and it is good. But having seen the one we have from Mombasa to Nairobi, having seen the cost, having seen what it generates, having seen the issues, looking overall as a country, we may then have to relook the question of viability if we are now looking for the love of the country. If you are looking at it as people from Nyanza, as people from Lowland, I think they should go and borrow money from anywhere and put it. But if you are looking at it as a country, as our children, grandchildren, and a legacy, having seen what the Chinese did with this, the cost and the corruption and all these things, we need to relook, make a few amends, re-evaluate, and then make it proper and even cheaper. If it turns out that Uganda will not utilize it in such a way that it makes money, then looking at our debt burden, we may have to wait to make it another time.
That would be very expensive, reconsidering to do it now that it's already been started. But that would also speak to how good we are with planning. Senator, do you think we need to relook the SGR? I mean, it is already, we've already done the first phase. It's just the second phase remaining. And it seems that if well managed, there could be viability on it.
Yes, I think for me, we need to relook at SGR and generally other big infrastructural projects. I say that because there were issues that were raised, which for me, they are yet to be answered concerning SGR. Issue number one, why not use the old track? You remove the old track, you replace it with SGR. That way, you reduce the amount that you are going to pay land speculators. Another issue, why didn't we use the so-called LAPSAT corridor? Or that is, we use the Lamu-Isiolo route. That way, you open northern frontier districts. But most importantly, what is the impact of that project on what we call budget deficit of this country? Remember, every time you have a huge loan, the effect of that is to crowd out private capital formation, because the government is going to have a huge debt. Then the government will be borrowing externally and domestically to plug that huge hole on its budget. As a result of that, banks will prefer to lend government as opposed to lend private individuals, and therefore businesses will not access capital. There'll be no new shops, new businesses which are being opened because people cannot access cheap credit. And therefore, for me, I am not a real supporter of what we call a budget deficit. I prefer what we call fiscal conservatism. That is, you ensure your expenditure almost equals your income, as opposed to having a huge budget deficit. And SGR can be a key driver for a ballooning deficit between countries' income and countries' expenditure in its budget.
All right, and of course it was not just all about SGR. There was some headway made when it comes to the construction of the express highway from Jomo Kenyatta to Waiyaki Way at 51 billion, the expansion of the northern bypass to ease congestion, and the Konza data center, which of course has been a long way waited for. So looking at what that means for Kenya, I'll start with you, Honorable Dege, with the road congestion being eased from Jomo Kenyatta all the way to hopefully onto Waiyaki Way, which is something which had been funded or initially was to be funded by World Bank, but they pulled out mysteriously.
It's good news for Kenyans, but I still strongly believe what will save our airport and our people going to the airport plus everything to the airport should be a tram service or train service, not by road. The road will still be congested. We need a serious train service to the airport.
Okay. Weda, your thoughts on whether those are things that Kenyans should be celebrating about?
Yeah, I think it is good news. My worry is when I hear 51, is it $51 billion or 51 billion Kenya shillings?
51 billion Kenyan shillings.
51 billion Kenya shillings is basically petty money that we should not borrow. It is something we just save on from the corruption sector. We can save and get the 51 billion. So it is good planning the project, but I don't think I would celebrate borrowing that money when we can just look at pocket change from our corruption sector and then get that money and then use it to do the road.
All right.
Can I mention that?
Yeah, sure.
It was not money that was being borrowed. If I read my paper correctly, this is what we call public-private partnership, PPP,
yes,
where
right.
the Chinese are going to build the superhighway and then they are going to charge. It will be a toll. And to me, that's very positive because we shall not incur anything.
Let me explain this. I think my colleague and the senator does not seem to understand the PPP. A PPP is basically that you don't have money and somebody has money, he comes and puts his money and you share. Now these are public resources that you now give into private hands. It should be good if we were doing a PPP with the railway, what we can't afford. But doing a PPP just for somebody to help you fix a window pane in your home so that you share the house, that's wrong. That's why I'm saying 51 billion is basic. We get it from the excess money you people earn in allowances in parliament. Then we use it to do the road.
No.
You just sit once in a week for 6 months and we have the money.
Look here, surely. As of now, we don't have that road, do we?
We don't have.
So meaning, surely,
we have money which you are gobbling down
if somebody can come and put it at his own cost, and then he charges until he gets his own money back, what's wrong?
Right, and we'll wait and see how that is going to go. But let's change the conversation here. And earlier on, there was a rather heated debate here on churches and the platform or pulpit being used. But churches have also become a place where politicians set out agenda. And that was the case with when there was a Kotu prayer day, but matters corruption and matters war on corruption. And quite a number of leaders stood up and made some very, very strong statements. And I want to hear what your take is. But let's first of all listen into what that was all about. And this is what happened yesterday in one of the churches.
The matters concerning
Christian faithfuls gathered at the St. Stephen Church along Jogoo Road to hold prayers for the workers, an event that was organized by the Central Organization of Trade Unions, KOTU.
Workers, trade unions and employers.
The prayers quickly turned into politics, with the war on corruption providing fodder for the leaders present, each taking the stage and condemning corruption.
The corruption of this magnitude cannot be solved by the judiciary. We are saying the president, please, from where you sit, You know the names of these people. You can access the names of these people. Give us the names.
Na hakuna mtu hajui viongozi wezi hapa Kenya. Unless we want to pretend. Watu wanajua.
The amount being mentioned today, they make Kamlesh Patni look like he was in a kindergarten.
When it was Nairobi Governor Mike Sonko's turn, he took the opportunity to call out leaders for what he termed as hypocrisy and half-hearted efforts in the war on corruption.
Ukikuja hapa kutuambia kuhusu ufisadi na tutaendelea kupigana na ufisadi, hata wewe ukiwa mfisadi utuambie. Kwa hivyo usikuja hapa kutuambia corruption na wewe ulikuwa pia mwizi number 1.
KOTU Secretary General Francis Atwoli hit out at corrupt politicians angling for higher office in 2022, saying they are unfit to lead.
Na tunaomba na nawaambia hapa and I'm in the church, kama hamrepent, kama hamwaji chest thumping, the person you support in the name of William Samoei Ruto will not be among the people. Yes, wananiweka maneno na it is not politics. In any country that cannot spur economic growth because of corruption.
The workers' prayer day is usually held every last Sunday ahead of the Labor Day celebrations. Minimum salary increments and the housing levy are expected to dominate this year's Labor Day celebrations on Wednesday. Ibrahim Karanja, KTN News.
All right, so a lot was said in that. Ambrose Weda, is this a case of the kettle calling the pot black? We had majority of those leaders coming out and making very strong statements. But Mike Mbuvi Sonko also was calling out names. But is it a case of the kettle calling the pot black?
In fact, it's a case of stingy people doing the same thing that the other fellow is doing, but then they leave nothing. Then they say, see, they were making politics right in church from the pulpit, talking, insulting people, doing all sorts of things. But then when it comes to their offerings, it is they talk like an elephant in the church.
Are you there?
But their givings are like a squirrel or a rabbit. That's what they are doing. They are criticizing their counterparts who go there and then they give, and they give well. I personally believe that whoever designs to keep the church poor wants the spreading of the good news to be curtailed. We think all the money, all of it, the ones you steal everywhere in parliament, bringing into church, will pray for it, cleanse it, and then will be used. It will be used to spread the good news of the kingdom. It will go into the people's heart, and then the corruption will reduce, because corruption, people are not corrupt externally. People are corrupt in their hearts first. They design it in their heart. They steal from their heart. Then they
what you're speaking to, I guess, is what Olesepit was saying, that they should not accept money in churches anymore. But before we get into that, the question here being, we have leaders there who are talking about corruption.
Yes.
We had some who are calling out and saying, why are you coming and talking about corruption here? Yet your own track record is one that cannot be desired.
But listen, I think, let me answer this straight. You have seen some leaders who are stuck in positions since you were born. Before you were born, they were in those positions, and they are there. How are they there? Corruption. Some of them are very rich. They own helicopters, several of them. Now, they are not professionals. They went to school just the other day. You understand? I saw Honorable, I love him, I respect him, Peter Kenneth. Which massive business does it have? Where did he work? He's super rich. You saw them.
But is that a problem if he's super rich? Maybe he has businesses that have got him in.
You know, if you have a business, if you have Kenya Breweries, it's yours or Safaricom, it is so known. This is a small economy. If you generate $1 billion from it, we will know exactly what you are doing. So some of these leaders, it is only that some are stealing today under President Uhuru's government, others stole under President Moi, others stole under President Kenyatta. So those stole earlier, before most of us were born, are now saying we are very clean. But they are accusing those who are stealing today. They themselves, the way they were told, they should confess and say, even for me, I was working as a clerk in Kenya Re or in this, then eventually I amassed wealth.
All right.
This wealth has been stolen, and they know it.
All right, Senator, some of the leaders there, unfortunately, it would be difficult to not associate them with a scandal here or a scandal there. But how are we ever going to win the war on corruption when we have the same people who have scandals behind them speaking louder, as it were, mourning louder than the bereaved?
Yes, indeed. I think for us, we need to be fair. We need to show justice so that when you say a certain person is corrupt, you also need to be investigated so that you are not taking advantage of the so-called fight against corruption to hide or manifest yourself as being clean. I think for that war to be seen as being fair, everyone must be investigated and those who are corrupt arrested.
All right, from a legal perspective, you're a lawyer, and one of the leaders there was saying that this fight cannot just be left to the corridors of justice. What is your take on that? Because then what other avenue do we have other than the court if it is to find guilty or not guilty?
I don't know. I disagree with that insinuation because the only institution that is legally supposed to fight corruption at the tail end is judiciary.
But so far it doesn't seem to be giving us that much headway.
Well, I think we have to live with it. One way probably to remedy that lacuna is to enact a law that sets timelines. I think one of the main complaints by Wananchi has been cases dragging on for a very long time. You can come up with timelines. We have a timeline that is provided for in elections, petitions, which judiciary has adhered to. Why not members of parliament going back to parliament, drafting a law on timelines and ensuring cases are heard and determined within certain time frame? Mm-hmm. So for me, I think we have to live with the judiciary. Of course, there is a lingering view by some people that judiciary is not working well, is not being fair. We see people with a lot of a reputation of being corrupt going scot-free. You know, politics and social life is about perception. So I think something has to be done. Judiciary has to rethink its philosophy, or Kenyans also have to think whether they can circumvent judiciary, which I'm not so sure. Somebody yesterday somewhere was proposed that president should take all these guys to a military barrack and tell them, I'm going to do something very harmful to you unless you surrender the money. So there are several possible ways, but for us, a civilized society, we must adhere
we stick to the cause.
Okay, my stand on the church and politics and money still stands. But let me talk about this idea of corruption and the judiciary. If we have realized there is a problem in the judiciary, we cannot run away from the judiciary. We fix that problem. But if we run away from the judiciary, we might end nowhere. And a lawlessness country is not a country. Mm-hmm. So if we strongly believe there is a problem in the judiciary, then we should zero in on the judiciary.
Do you think there's a problem with the judiciary?
Currently, let me not condemn judiciary wholesomely, because the justice process starts from the investigators down.
But do you think there is a problem with the judiciary?
If you give them a weak case, what do you expect them to do?
So there is no problem with the judiciary. The issue then would be
I don't want to say wholesomely there is no problem with the judiciary, but the justice system, we need to...
But Mheshimiwa, how will we fix these things if we cannot call a spade a spade?
It's what I'm telling you. We need to relook into the process from the beginning up to the end. Because you'll find the judges also have a reason to defend themselves, and the investigators here. We need
and therein lies the problem, because if we keep blaming this institution and another one, and then the institution also has a reason why it can blame another institution, and that continues, then we really do not solve the problem. We have to get to a point where we can identify the problem and say this is exactly where we are going wrong and fix it, or at least have a starting point.
Okay, let me say this. The problem is both at the investigation and at the judiciary.
Whether do you feel that we have a problem with the judiciary? Do you think that's where the problem starts? Or at least let me say where the problem is biggest, where we need to start off?
I think we need to start, number one, from the heart of man. Our hearts. People steal from the heart. Those who have not been able to steal have not been able because majority of them lack the opportunity. Majority of our leaders and our people who have had the opportunity, you have seen the way they have behaved. Taking mathematically, it means that if you put also people like Weda, they'll have to pass a test. So we have to change the heart of man first. That therefore answers the question, is there a problem in the judiciary? Corruption runs through, from kindergarten to the examination room, to the results, to the judiciary. They are also very good judges, hardworking, straight. Thieves are also there. They are also good investigators. Those who investigate, they are very good ones. But there are also those who, when they come to ask you about corruption money, they ask you, where is the money? Do you have it? If you have it, they say, okay, we can see what to do. We can make some evidence weak. So the problem is across board. That's why there was a survey here when young people in Kenya were asked, do you care how you get it? We say, we don't care. Whether we steal it, we do what we want is to be wealthy. Therefore, it is this time that we need to change the heart of man. The heart of man needs to repent. You talk to it, you ingest information so that they turn to good. They reject when you are in charge. You don't overvalue land so that you get a cut. Otherwise, majority of those who are jumping up and down and pretending are actually corrupt minus opportunity. If you want to know, if you go into the church itself, the problem now in church is not about immorality. It's about money. When it comes to money, you see them tearing each other. Money, money, nothing else. Money. Meaning that when it comes to money, even those who are in charge of the spiritual part, they put it aside. They say, God, hold on. Let's sort out the issue of money. So let's see how we deal with the heart. When you see the Mheshimiwa Atwoli, all those people he gathered in the church, they were talking very hard about others. But what about them? Atwoli has been at the helm of Kotu ever since I was born. He's been there. What does he use? Money. You can see he has bangles and all those things. Money. You take money from him and tell him you will take money, say, I'd rather die. Some people have said, I'd rather die. So let us change the
so how do we change that heart? Because, well, it's good to say we change the heart.
How you change the heart of man is you ingest information. You change the software. You put in information, good information, values. You allow values that come from his creator, values about integrity, honesty, so on. That comes slowly. That requires that when my child is born, he sees that I'm honest, I have integrity. But if suddenly today I was very broke, then President Uhuru gives me a job, some small parastatal, then my own children see that in 1 week, we are moving from the Squela to Karen. Now I have a job. Even if I tell them, oh, my sons and daughters, I work very hard, they know that Daddy is stealing. And they will say, when I grow big, when I become big, I would also want to be appointed to a parastatal.
Okay. Honorable Irungu Kangata, where do we start, or what needs to shift? Because it seems like we keep going in just around the circle. If it's not the judiciary, it's the investigative arm. If it's not the investigative arm, it's the police. If it's not the police, but there has to be somewhere where this war on corruption has to start and make progress.
No, for me, I think we are on a positive trajectory in the sense that the untouchables are now being taken to court. Maybe we need to hasten that process, and we hope judiciary is going to do its course and ensure Kenyans get justice. There is more media exposure for corrupt deals. I'm sure every parastatal head or any person in a key position in government is now more careful when it comes to matters corruption. For me, I think once we do an audit, maybe in the next 1 or 2 years, we shall be celebrating Uhuru Kenyatta for having fought corruption in a manner that may bear fruits in Kenya. For me, I'm more optimistic than being a pessimistic person.
When you say that we'd be celebrating him for fighting corruption, what really has changed? Other than the fact that he has spoken very strictly,
Arrest of people you wouldn't think they'll be arrested. We have seen PSs being arrested. We have seen major people, major untouchables, including governors. What we need to do probably is to push DCI, push DPP to continue doing those arrests. To me, Kenya is on a positive trajectory since Uhuru Kenyatta was re-elected in terms of fighting corruption. However, prosecution is not enough from where I see it. for me. I think also the philosophy that guides the government needs to change. What do I mean? I mean we need to reduce the size of government. Kenya has almost 350 state parastatos. Those parastatos, without saying, they don't add any value to this country. A good example is like the so-called regional development authorities. With devolution, their roles were superseded by county governments. So, for instance, the so-called Kerio Valley and Lake Basin Development Authority, it's superfluous. So we need to reduce that, because it goes without saying, when you're a public servant and you see billions of money which have been given to you to manage, and you're not accountable to the people, your propensity to think of stealing tends to be high. So therefore, for me, reducing government is one way of fighting corruption in a more systematic way.
Okay, we are out of time. We only have 4 minutes, so I'll give you an opportunity for closing remarks. But from the discussion we've had here, it doesn't sound to me like Kenyans would be very optimistic that we have a solution on corruption. It seems like we really cannot put our finger on where the problem is, and as a result, then it becomes difficult to solve a problem. Unless we can put our finger on what the issue is, then it becomes difficult to solve. But your closing comments, Honorable Dege, let's start with you.
Let me say that for us to eradicate corruption in this country, we have to make it a responsibility of every Kenyan. We don't just leave it to the president and watch the way he's doing it.
The problem with that is that we've said that for so long. And how is it the responsibility of every Kenyan when every Kenyan is corrupt according to what we say?
We need a culture change. And this one, the way Ambrose was putting it, we started as low as kindergarten, coming up to school level, up to the workplace. Because if we bring out already corrupt professionals, we don't expect any change. Like now, you look at majority of our youths, they are not keen in employment because they need quick wealth. And when you need quick wealth, anywhere where you cannot get wealth, you will not concentrate. Now, let me close by at least saying something. Me, from the trade union level, my brother Ambrose has mentioned my colleague very badly, Francis Atwoli. I think Ambrose is very smartly dressed. The dressing of Atwoli is no different with what he is putting on. I think it should be fair to Francis. Thank you.
Ambrose, what are your closing comments?
I said he has been there since you were born.
No,
that's the part I said.
It's less than 20 years in trade union, and me and you, we are 50.
Must you be there forever? What if we are going to deal with corruption? We must eliminate the fear of poverty. I don't think personally as whether I would want to steal, but if I remember that I will sleep hungry tomorrow or the next, and many things, go back to the poverty that I saw, then if I have a chance, I'll say, let me put aside a few millions. And since I'm not generating the few millions, what do? You steal them. Let us reorganize our country such that there is affordable, quality health care for all. That will reassure people. Two, we have sufficient, good food security, so that somehow you will eat. Even if you don't eat your choice food, you will eat. There is some level of stability. Added to security, you'll find a large portion of Kenyans coming out of the fear of poverty bracket to confidence, and therefore saying, no, I will not steal. For now, it is so much the fear of poverty that when people are told you will retire, they steal quickly. So that if you are unwell, because again in old age there will be a bit of sickness, so they steal. That theft is because of the structure. So I think government should be reorganized. The president should start reorganizing so that when he leaves, we have good, quality, affordable health care. One of the biggest problems, the biggest challenges. Finally, on judiciary, there is a problem that I have seen. We have what is called researchers in the judiciary. They write judgments, and some of them sell those judgments. They come and tell you, how much do you want to pay for this? And they seem like they are right. That forms is a very worrying trend, and I think it should be addressed. Yes.
All right. Honorable Irungu Kangate, your closing comments, please.
Some of the guys who are stealing money are people I suspect they can still live a good life, notwithstanding failure to steal. So I'm not so sure whether it's the fear of poverty that makes them to steal. Some of them, let's say, they are engineers, they are lawyers, people who can have a life on their own without necessarily stealing. I think For me, I think the problem tends to be somehow pushed by politicians. And where do politicians tend to be corrupt? I think there's a connection to the idea of you have to steal for you to get money for you to be re-elected. And every politician is supposed to be re-elected. So therefore, maybe I think the best attack would be on the issue of politics and money. How do you ensure people can be re-elected, notwithstanding having a lot of money or not? How do you make campaigns cheaper? That way, politicians, if you can make politics cheap, and then politicians will have no incentives to steal, and then they are going to oversight the other guys. They are going to oversight the other guys.
Part of the best
maybe that way. Otherwise, people will be saying, hey, I need money for me to go and campaign and fight my political opponents.
You're talking about here, Senator, is more than politics. It's the whole country stealing, public service stealing, everywhere. People, we need to re-examine ourselves as a country and see how do we stop this thing.
Gentlemen, we'll have to wind it up right there because of time. Thank you very much, Senator Irungo Kang'ata.